Hi, everybody. It's September 11th, 2025, and this is the weekly Backdrop Dev meeting. We're going to be talking about the Backdrop 132 release, which comes out in just 4 short days on Monday, September 15th. And yeah, we'll recap the work that needs to be done before that release. We'll do some introductions to get us started. We've got a small handful of people here today. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on GitHub and the internet, and I'm a core committer and the technical lead for the Backdrop project. I'm calling in from Lansing, Michigan today. I'm at a friend's house, but normally calling in from Oakland, California. We'll go to Luke and then Martin.
Hey everybody, I'm Luke McCormick, sell ear on various things. I'm coming to you from Martinez, California, which is kind of near San Francisco and Oakland. I haven't been around in Backdrop for a little bit because I've been busy with one of my other projects, Bad Camp, which is coming up on September 25th and 26th, including a Backdrop Summit uh, for those interested. And I'll leave it at that. Badcamp registration is free at badcamp.org.
Thank you, Luke.
Am I allowed to do commercials during my intros?
Yeah, for the free community event that heavily features Backdrop in it, yes, you can definitely do that. Any meeting you wish to join. We'll go to Martin and then Izzy.
Hi, I'm Martin Price, Yorkshire Pudding around the Backdrop community, and I'm a Backdrop developer in Northeast England.
Thanks, Martin. Izzy?
Hi, I'm Izzy. I'm a freelance developer and site builder in Vancouver, British Columbia. Uh, Glad to be here.
Great. Thank you, Izzy. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, we always start with contrib updates and thank new contributors for porting or creating new modules for Backdrop. There were two new contrib modules this week, the lazy load module and search API exclude module. Thank you for porting those modules. Uh, let's see. We don't have any general discussion topics that were flagged for this week. We are continuing to set up the CDN on backdropcms.org. So if you encounter weirdness on any of our properties that seemingly just started happening in the last couple of weeks, please continue to let us know via Zulip or the backdrop ops / backdropcms.org GitHub issue queue while we continue to roll that out. So Backdrop 132, we have the preview release that came out last week, and that's available off of GitHub. The preview release right now is still identical to the 132 release that will come out on September 15th. We do have a couple of changes that could potentially still happen before the release of Backdrop 132. One of which is there's a new version of CKEditor, CKEditor 46.0.3, that just came out this week. Sorry. Oh shoot. I'm just looking at the releases of CKEditor, and guess what? There's another release of CKEditor. Yeah. So version 46.1 came out day before yesterday. So new version of CKEditor. We try to always come out with the latest version of CKEditor when a new minor version is released. But with frequent API changes in CKEditor and just the incredibly rapid release cycle of CKEditor itself, it's a little bit hard to keep on top of it. So we're two versions behind now. Um, so we could potentially get ourselves updated to version 46.1 of the CKEditor library before it comes out. It's good that it's not another major release, like it's not version 47, which they frequently do API breaks, and so in theory, this will be API break free from the version that we're already using. So hopefully we'll be able to get that version updated. The issue that we have for that is 6904. Right now, this issue is closed. I'm going to go ahead and reopen it though. Because we'll. Oh, wait, hang on. Oh, never mind. Indigo's Element already made another one. 6959 is the new issue for the very latest version. So follow along in issue 6959 to see if we can get that version seek editor up to date. The only other issue that's in the 132 milestone, I'm gonna put this one into the milestone as well. 132. The only other issue that's in the 132 milestone is this admin bar issue 6916. Well, I'm going to share my screen so people have a better idea of what it is that we're talking about. Here we go. This issue 6916, we talked about it last week, that changes the mobile presentation of the admin bar from doing this right left thing to making it stack like this vertically so that mobile doesn't do the right left behavior. But we encountered some issues with the usability of this when using a small desktop screen. And so I posted some suggestions that we talked about last week. So we'll see if we can get this completed. But this is also a UX improvement, and so it doesn't strictly need to be in the 132 milestone. It's just that's where it had been. So if this doesn't get in for 132, it could be a 132.1 issue. Not a problem. So what else can we do before the release of 132? I saw that our core committer Herbduel has been working on some other UX related things. These SVG icons, we're using SVGs in most of Backdrop at this point, but there's still a couple of places that are using PNGs or even GIFs. And this is one of them. He opened this one just day before yesterday, that the contextual module that makes little contextual links to edit a node or a view by hovering over the view, and it makes a little drop-down menu on that area of the page, that we're currently using a PNG for that. And so he filed this issue. I'm guessing it's because, like, I was kind of expecting a pull request along with this, but he just, oh, did I say 2 days ago? 2 hours ago. I'm guessing that he's already working on this. So we can hope to see something to review here. But he also posted some updates to these table sort issues. So the table sort icons are also using PNGs right now. But to make the whole situation way more confusing, we can't agree on whether or not the arrow should point down or whether or not the arrow should point up for a sort ascending or sort descending. And apparently the internet is fully divided as to which way arrows should point when sorting ascending or descending. And to really complicate things, the system styling for ascending and descending is one way, but then the 7 theme overrides it and flips the arrow around and points it the other way. So even Backdrop Core itself is not consistent in whether or not the arrow points up or the arrow points down. So anyway, Herbduel came in and said, hey, let's just swap the icon. There's also the wording, which is also confusing. But somewhere in here, there's not just this issue. This one is just talking about the problem of like which way should the arrows go and which way should the text go. But there's another one that is just here we go. This one doesn't make any changes to the way that the arrows go. It just purely replaces the PNG with an SVG. And so this one, he is also marked RTBC, just swapping out this theme image to use the new icon function and use use the corresponding SVG that we already have. So yeah, this issue and the other one both could use some feedback. And as these other SVG issues come in, which is a great candidate for something that can be done kind of at any time. Yeah, if people want to keep an eye on these SVG related issues, please do. Yeah, any commentary on those issues before I keep moving along?
What was that last one? What was the number of it?
Oh yeah. So issue 6779.
6779. Okay.
I have to say, on pretty much nearly any table where there's a sort, I nearly always end up pressing the sort twice to get one to select the column and one to get it done. So I just press it until I get the order that I need and pay no attention to what direction the arrow is.
Yeah.
It's like plugging the USB cable. You always have to flip it over like many times trying to get it to go in.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it really is.
I'm fascinated by this where I mean you diligently looked for sort of the accepted informed answer and came up with nobody knows. It's one of those sort of things. I'll
Yeah.
throw in another ad for Badcamp. Actually, I'll pre-release information. I'll let you know who our keynote speaker is. That it's not public yet, so this is don't tell anybody. But it's Emma Harrell, who's the user interface lead for the Drupal project. Yeah, so I'll ask her this just because I think this is kind of a fascinating question of like something that seems like it should have an obvious answer, but I mean, doesn't, right?
Yeah. What was it? So we're using the phosphor icons. Let's see if I can. I wish GitHub wouldn't collapse the comments. I understand why they do. But this is really funny that we're using the phosphor icons for our SVGs. And you can see here that sort ascending in phosphor is a down arrow and sort descending is an up arrow. And a lot of people think descending should be down quite reasonably and ascending should be up, right? And so over in phosphor itself, the library that we're using, there's an issue that's like, hey, this is this is confusing. And so it happened over in the library itself. And if we choose to make sort descending be down, ironically, the name of the SVG works. So we'll literally use an icon that is the opposite of what it's named in the SVG library. So yeah, there's that problem. Or if we decide like, hey, we're gonna make an exception for this, we could literally just change the name of these two icons to match what we think they should actually be. And maybe that would be acceptable too, but that's gonna cause a different kind of confusion.
Yeah, there's no response. It's not some sort of crime. There's no innocent option.
Yeah.
What is the name of the icon that is just a small down arrow and an up arrow?
Yeah, so I think that that's actually what this pull request does, is it doesn't actually use the sort ascending, descending icons. It uses the like caret down fill. So
Okay.
yeah, but this does do the same way that it is right now, where it's like ascending is pointing down,
Right.
and descending is pointing up, which is
Right.
the current way that we have it in the table sort indicator provided by core.
Right, so they're pointing in the same direction. The only difference is that it's using the SVG caret up or caret down instead of the PNG.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It does get a little bigger, it looks like. It used to be
Yeah,
13 pixels and now it's 15, but yeah.
Oh, that might be why it looks better too. It seems to be a bit darker too. It's got more contrast to it.
Yeah. So this icon is quite, or this issue is very reasonable of like, hey, let's just do this.
Yeah.
But I think also because like I said, 7 also overrides it. This actually only updates the table sort icon used by front end themes, which means it does have a slight possible effect on front end themes that are using um, the core styling.
Yeah, but I don't think I like the big extra icon myself. I prefer a simple one that's for views tables and things. So I would definitely prefer to just stay simple.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on from that issue. They are very yeah, it's very thought-provoking that sort issue. But yeah, just generally replacing PNGs with SVGs is an excellent and worthy objective for us. We don't actually even remove the PNGs yet, like per our backwards compatibility policy of themes, especially contrib like admin themes like Gen. And Gen's not one that would actually use PNGs because it's more modern, but if themes are using the core icons, they'll remain in there until version 2, where we remove all of the old PNGs out of the MISC directory. So it's really just updating the markup and that's all there is to those issues.
Nate, if the block is so, is it fair to say that the blocker is making a decision on which way to point the arrow?
No.
No? Okay.
Well, no and yes. For this issue, HerbDuel is not this one. For oh shoot, use SVGs for tables for header sort icons. 6779. HerbDuel a couple hours ago
Mhm.
said, hey, let's just go with swapping the icons the same as they are now. Don't
Okay.
change the description, don't change the direction, just swap them out. And so he's saying that this shouldn't be blocked
Right.
because it's just a swap. Um,
Makes
and
sense.
we have the other issue in which we're arguing, and this one is like, let's just get SVGs, and then let's talk about changing the text and the icons in the other issue.
Right.
But
Okay.
this also doesn't make changes to 7 either. And so there's also that kind of downside of like, it would be nice if we could also get 7 updated, but this is a good start.
Sure. That all makes sense to me. The other one, to the extent that making a decision is what's blocking it, I guess the fact that we have, if it's a question of like flipping a coin, we've already got a default position, and I guess I would just argue that IntelliConsensus of it's not really broken, right? If half the people think we should do it one way and half the other, then it's yeah. I guess I was trying to figure out if we need to force a decision, and I don't know if we really need to if we have a default position that's as good as, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know either,
Yeah.
honestly.
Okay.
Like, I don't know. I don't know if this is, I mean, our policy is when we get stuck that it escalates, right? And so,
Right.
but yeah, I don't know. Like, I also just feel like it's so pedantic,
Yeah. Well, I think
right?
there's a difference between like a clear improvement, which is stuck, and we need a way to unstick it. In a case where should we change something we already have, right? Like changing the direction of the arrow doesn't fundamentally improve backdrop if we're undecided that we want to do that. So, I don't know if I would, want to escalate this unless there was a consensus emerging. But anyways, I think we can move on.
Well, if you think about time, if you think about time and you've got a tape recorder, and you want to go back in time, you have an arrow pointing going down and going back. So the same as ascending or descending, like if you're using date and you're descending, the newest is at the top. Somehow the way the carrots are pointing seems quite intuitive to me.
Yep. Yeah, Izzy, I totally get what you're saying there, and that's the way I think too. But let's not get ourselves going
Yeah.
about the details
Yeah.
right now.
Well, no, I don't know. Did you wrap up on 69, 61? Because that one looked to me like if Laren is correct, then this should make a huge improvement in solving the optimization of config storage and files.
Yeah, so yeah, okay, we're putting aside the
Yeah.
SVGs and moving on to other topics. So yeah, I want to talk about two other issues that have been receiving a lot of activity this week, and they're not strictly 132 related. Uh, but actually I guess this one was just earlier today. But yeah, this issue that Richard Lampet opened about his site is constantly getting fatal errors when his site is under load reading config. And um, yeah, great report, great summary. Um, and Laren, oh, Laren and Justin have both hopped in here and said that they've solved this problem by switching to database config storage. And this is one of the reasons why we added database config storage, is that the file system is not consistently fast and accessible on different hosting providers. It's super common now that the file system is distributed and network based and not a local file system. And sometimes, like using something like S3, that can be very slow. And sometimes there's even rate limiting, like on how many files can be accessed at a time by a single node. And so, by a single web server, I mean. And so if that's the situation, like if you find yourself facing this, like Richard is here, switching to database config is almost certainly going to be the available solution. But what Laren is investigating here is like, can we also make it so that the file base config is more robust? And so we found this pull request, and I haven't had a chance to look it over fully yet. I know that it adds a static variable, so it adds this static variable, but I do believe that there's already static caching in the config. It might not be in that function, but that's why I'm kind of like I'm not sure if this is going to make a difference because I'm pretty sure that we've already got static caching in there. Adding some kind of cache into config, the file-based config, may have a benefit, but it's probably going to be dependent on what your caching system is, what your file system is, whether or not it would be beneficial or not. Yeah, here it is. See, it's right at the very top of the file. So here it is. We've got it in the config function itself is where all of the config files are cached. And so when you call config get, it it only loads it from disk once, I do believe. And then stores that. However, oh, I'm getting my memory jogged here a little bit. Okay. So it does have static caching, but it only does it if config static is true inside of the config file. And so let me pull open the config files that come with core. So if we look in core modules, oops, sorry, are we not in core? Here it is, core modules, system, and I'm just going to look at the default config file for system core. So this line here in the config file, config static true, this tells the backdrop config system that when this config file is loaded, store it in memory so that if you're going to access this config file a whole bunch of times in a single request, it's only going to read it from disk one time. And then after that, it will read it from memory. And possibly, you know, what Laren is suggesting here, it would basically make it so that all config files would always do this all the time. And I think that I have some concern about doing that because there's a lot of config files, and a lot of config files, like fields and views, have their own caching systems that are already storing that stuff in memory. And so caching it at the config layer is adding a second cache on top of a cache that already exists at the field layer or the content type layer or the views layer. And so there's already other caches, both static and database driven, that are caching those things. And so blanket caching everything might be a bit too aggressive at the config layer. But also this approach of like config static equals true, you have to opt into. And so a lot of modules and a lot of config files, even in core, might not be leveraging static caching as well as they should be. And if that's the case, you might end up with something where a single page load might read the same config file a dozen times because it's not config cached. Like if you had a config read inside of a loop, for example, and you had 100 items and you said config get, config get, config get inside of that loop, it's going to do 100 file access reads potentially. And so the thing to investigate here, well, switching to the database config is probably going to solve the problem. But the thing to investigate here is what config files are getting accessed so frequently that it's causing an issue. Or potentially, because Richard is saying like this happens while under load. And I'm not quite sure what volume that is. Like if it's like thousands of requests per second. He did mention that he's using private files. And so that does mean that like a single page load, if it contained an image gallery that was all images that were stored in the private file system, loading that one page with 25 images on it would cause 26 HTTP requests against Backdrop. And even if you did have config static caching in place, that would still be doing, you know, file access for at least the system core JSON file for every one of those requests. And then of course it's also going to be requesting the file itself. So yeah, I'm not quite sure, exactly what the scenario is. Like, would static variable caching help this scenario or not? So there's some more research to be done here as far as like where this problem is cropping up. Yeah, do you guys have any commentary or thoughts on this issue? Okay, well, maybe I'll just move on. I thought this is an interesting issue to come up, and I posted a comment here, and this is just happening today, so we'll see how this develops. I'll throw out there something that I would like to see just offhandedly. Maybe somebody that is here or watches these videos might adopt it at some point. This config static equals true, and actually the config translatables along with it. These internal config properties are not very well exposed. Like they're almost like secret features that having config static in your config file. I'm sure it's documented in our config system somewhere, but there's no API, there's no methods on our config object to like turn on and off static caching. And so if you want to turn on um, this option config static, well, you put it in your default config file, but that won't actually help sites that have already installed your module. A module needs to provide an update hook that just says config set config static equals true. And so you just have to set this internal property with our normal config set function or method. And I really think that there should be like uh, config enable static as a method and config disable static as a method or something of that name. Config set static, config set static would make sense with like true or false. To make it so that you could set this property in a way that was like officially supported and documented in our classes and in our methods rather than just knowing that there's this magic config thing in this file that turns on a certain behavior in the way that config works.
Right, and it is already there in default backdrop, but it's not being utilized.
Well, it is, well, oh yeah, it's not utilized everywhere. So it is here in the system core.json, and I think it's in other ones like it's config or system date. Here's one. Um, so there's no config static here in system mail.json. And should there be? It's pretty harmless to cache, 81 bytes of data, in a static variable cache. And the benefit of caching this could be substantial if you had a page somewhere in Backdrop that sent a bulk email, and maybe it checks to see what the default mail handler is 100 times while sending that bulk email. It's going to read this from disk 100 times because there's no config static here. If you call config get 100 times, and so it would be a good exercise to go through all of Core's config files and evaluate, is there the benefit of setting config static to true on pretty much all of the config files that are loaded in Core. We've kind of done it a la carte of just like, whenever we've encountered one that is problematic, then we set that config static equals true. But it's really not consistent. Yeah, it's a taxonomy settings. Let's see, telemetry.
Well, like you say, contrib module that is doing newsletter mailouts by email, it could set the set it to static.
Yeah, yeah. So we could go through and just like set all of these to be config static equals true. See, this is an example here. User roles, for example, like user roles are statically cached elsewhere inside of the system. And so we don't need it on this case, and we don't need it on views, but we might want it here like on the list of password or the list of emails. Actually, this actually is one where it's like, okay, this is actually 4.5 kilobytes of data. Is it likely that these are going to be called more than once per page? Pretty unlikely, really, unless you're sending a password reset to everybody in your entire site. But, Backdrop Core doesn't provide any mechanism to do that. So it kind of like if it's a small config file and accessed a lot, it definitely should have config static equals true. If it's a big config file or in a group of config files that is cached elsewhere, then it shouldn't be config cached. So, there's a balance here about which ones should be and which ones shouldn't be.
And it's awkward to tell if it's also hidden behind a role. Or you get used to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And and the whole feature is kind of secret, and that's what I really don't like, the config static ability.
Luke's pointed out that you search for config static in the docs site and there's no results.
Mm.
So it's very secret.
Yeah, let's see. Let's see. I think we have let's see, just searching for config. Oh, and of course that gets us into that and not, because I just want a search for configuration. Here we go. Working with configuration. So this is okay, but this is deployment instructions. Yeah. Good question. Let's see if we can find it. Hook system templates, testing frameworks. No. Yeah. I'm sure that there's a config documentation of some kind, but I don't know where it is or how good its quality is. And I do doubt that config static is specifically covered. But at least if we had config set static, at least we would have a place to document where that is. So like here's the documentation for config set. So anyway, there's no issue for that. I'm just spinning a yarn here and hoping that it'll happen.
So the feature request here would be for a config static setter function, right?
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, so have something just like that I just looked for. So this is so config set exists. And this is what I'm saying, that right now, like you can do config, and I'm sorry, I'm just typing it into the search. So config set is also the functional equivalent. So right now you do this config set config static true. I mean, yeah, sorry, you need to actually specify the config file. My module. I don't know why I'm doing this in the search file. But anyway, it's something like this. You say config set to your config file name, and then you say config static equals true. And what I'm saying we should have is config set. I mean, I'm not sure if we need both the functional version and the method version. That's been what we've been doing. Where you can say config set static and have true equals true or false.
Mm.
And the method.
I imagine most of the time the methods would be enough, because if you care enough about your config to be doing that, then you're going to be loading the config object rather than just always using config set or config get.
Yep, I agree with you. Like this would be sufficient.
Yeah.
To have.
So in terms of descending levels of obscurity, like the most obvious thing is an actual user interface control to do something, and then you have a method to do something, and then finally at the most obscure, you just have a variable that if you choose to like manually set it, it has an effect.
Yeah, this is like even more hidden than like something in settings.php. Because at least the stuff in setting, I mean, there are some invisible things in settings.php too, but yeah. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so we're gonna have to wrap up. I did want to talk about this issue that has been receiving a bunch of activity and this over the last week, and that's what happens with Backdrop when you're using a proxy server or a CDN. And there's a lot of conversation happening here, but we're just gonna have to come back to that next week and talk to it again. But next week will also be exciting because that'll be September 18th, so that'll be after the Backdrop 132 release. So we'll also be celebrating that release and doing an update on our progress. All right, so we're gonna come back to that. But yeah, that's it for today. Does anybody have any closing thoughts before we close?
I wanted to find out if anybody's going to come to the Backdrop Summit at Bad Camp in 2 weeks. So I can find that. I'll come back next week too.
Yeah, please do if you're interested in making a visit out to Oakland, California, to what is the unofficial Backdrop headquarters. We'd love to see you. So Jen and I will be there, and yeah, and Luke, of course, and yeah, we'll be there for the Backdrop Summit day. So all right,
Well,
let's close for today. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the recording. Thank you all very much. We'll see everybody online and on the other side of the 132 release.